Hello, this is Wacy with Brazos River Air Conditioning and the AC with Wacy podcast. Today's podcast is going to be over code changes that are coming to Texas. We'll be airing this one today. It's Saturday. I'll try to have it up tonight. We'll still be putting out an episode tomorrow. More, I'm doing a double episode this week, more out of a situation that I ran across than anything. But basically, I ran into a house that has extreme high humidity, mold growing everywhere, and some very bad HVAC stuff done, as well as some stuff the builder should have caught. And I've done a lot of hammering on this within the HVAC community the last couple of years around here, as well as my YouTube videos and stuff. And I get told by a lot of people that the mold and the results that I say can happen if you don't do this stuff, that it's a long shot that you'll ever see it. This house is a perfect example of what can happen if you don't follow these practices. So I'll be doing a full episode on that tomorrow. So you'll kind of get a double shot of me this week. I believe that house, I'll reference it a couple of times in regards to these code changes and why they're being made. But I think it plays nicely into this episode a little bit as well. If you're listening to us from out of state, you're probably already on this code. We're going to 2018 energy code. The building code's going to roughly our building, our electrical, our plumbing, all of that's going to 2018 to 2020. A lot of areas of the country have been on this code for a while. If you would, I'd still appreciate you listening to the podcast and let us know if I say something that is not correct. Please feel free to send me a message and correct me. Please be respectful and polite about it. But feel free to contact me. I'm by no means perfect. I'm not doing this podcast because I think I'm that much better than anyone else. It's just I run into stuff like this to where I heard that the code was changing back in April or May. I talked to a lot of contractors in the last few weeks that have no idea it's coming. And it's stuff like that that got me into doing the YouTube videos and stuff like that. It's not because I don't think I can be wrong or anything like that. I'm just trying to get as much information as I know out there, and if I can be corrected or advised on how to approach some of this stuff, because this code change is new, I think I have a good idea of how to do it because of contacts I have. However, if I'm wrong, please feel free to give us a little help down here. Maybe there's something that you can do that I don't mention where you can seal ductwork better for duct blasters, or something like that, to where your input could help those of us in Texas that are listening to this. I'm going to go through kind of the energy code part of it, some of the building, some of the ventilation, and how I see it affecting our industry, as well as things that I know that you can do to help. And then I'm going to focus a lot of it on tighter construction and spray foam houses. Like I said, I'm not perfect, but I run into a lot of houses that are really poorly done. And the thing about tighter construction and spray foam construction, as that becomes a mainstream, is it's not that it doesn't, it's not just that it doesn't perform as efficiently as it should. It's that you're creating actual health problems in the house that can really negatively affect people. The house that I ran into this last week, I would not stay overnight in that house, let alone live in that house, until a lot of these problems are addressed. And to be honest, I don't know the full scale of what we're going to have to do. I know we're going to have to overhaul the HVAC system. We're going to have to add ventilation. We're going to have to do a bunch of this stuff. But if we do all of that and we're going to do a mold test after we clean the duct and improve the AC and add ventilation and add dehumidification control. Uh, and if they still test for mold in their walls and their ceiling, I don't know what the next step is. Are they in a 2-year-old home that they're going to have to strip and redo? Um, it's something that can really affect people on a real level. So I feel like stressing that part of it is going to be a big part of this video because I think that may be the most important part of this code change. Uh, as far as steps that you should be taking, I know in Dublin, Texas, which is not a very big town, they are enforcing this code. I bid a commercial job last week where I was asked for a com check and a heat load and all of this stuff. And I do my manual JDNS, manual N, manual com. I do all of those, so I was ready with a lot of that stuff. I had not done a com check before. I had farmed out a couple, but I hadn't done one personally before. And it's kind of intense. It's not anything major, but it is time consuming. So if I were an HVAC contractor in Texas, that's the first step I would take is go ahead and Google what year of energy code, electrical code, all this stuff that we're going to. Buy the book, buy a subscription to a site that allows you access to it. Search through the code for, whatever you normally do, new construction practices, sealing of ductwork, all of these things. Go ahead and familiarize yourself because I believe this stuff will be enforced more than our code has been in the past. I was told that it was coming back in April or May by an inspector who was wondering if I was aware of any of this stuff, and because I had been expecting this change for a while, I was familiar with some of it, and he said from the conversations he had had, there weren't a lot of people that were, but I do feel like the inspectors have put a lot of training in this last year from what I can gather. And I believe this stuff will be enforced, and I believe it's going to change a lot of practices in my mind for the better. But yeah, you probably need to hit those books, learn your code again, and then start taking steps to be able to pass these inspections and bring stuff up to code and everything, because it will require you to change your install practices somewhat, or on a broad scale it will. There's contractors out there who are doing some of this stuff. We try to do most of this stuff, but I can tell you from the installs that I run across servicing, there's a lot of them that aren't. So if you're one of those that aren't, you probably need to revise your system that you have with your employees and accountability with employees, making sure that they do different things. That way you don't end up having to go back and redo stuff. Bottom line, this podcast is there to inform homeowners, inform contractors, and basically help contractors where I can. If I can tell you about something that makes your business run better without you having to learn from experience, then I've done what I'm hoping to do. If you hear part of this and you think you have an idea of how to do it better, or you have a way that you're doing that you know is better, please feel free to message me, comment, shoot me your phone number. I'll give you a call. We'll have a conversation. Be respectful, of course, and polite and all that stuff. But I am very open to being in contact with other contractors, both in state and out of state, and learning what I can. I like to deep dive on subjects. I like getting different points of view. So whether you're in state, out of state, if you hear something that you think you can comment on or want to have a conversation on, hit me up. All right. So I think the first thing to address, it seems to be a common thing here in Texas. If you are not in a city or you're not in a county that inspects, that you think code does not apply. This is homeowners mainly. Most contractors know that code applies whether they ignore it or not. But if you're a homeowner and you're under the assumption that this code does not apply to you because you live out in the country, you are wrong. Um, Up until 2001, that would have been correct. Texas did not have any statewide code up to 2001. Basically, cities could set it, county could set it, but there was no statewide code. Following 2001, there has been a statewide building and electrical and all of this code. 2015 energy code has been in place in Texas for a number of years. It doesn't get enforced a lot. That's why this would not be a huge change if it was enforced. But because it hasn't been enforced, this is going to be a major change for some contractors. So just know that no one in the state is beyond an inspector coming in and saying that you're outside of code and you need to overhaul something, or God forbid you have a gas line leak or an electrical problem, burn down, blow up a house, that type of stuff. If you're outside of code, it's still your liability. So that's the first thing that I kind of want to get out there, because I run into that a lot, to where I'll tell somebody about something that's in code, whether it be a contractor or a homeowner, and they'll brush it off and they'll say it's out in the country. And I don't care if it's out in the country, it still applies. I do believe you'll see more inspection on new homes. I do believe inspectors are going to be hammering down on this. I don't think this is anything they're going to let slide. I think they're going to make you adjust. The state has invested a lot of money into its inspectors, getting training and all of that in the last year, and they didn't do that with the intention of the inspectors not doing their job. So I would prepare yourself to be inspected and to basically be accountable for your work, which means you need to know what you're getting into. I'm starting to really like this saying, expect better, inspect better, be better. Basically, you should always expect yourself to be a little bit better. You should expect your builder to do his job a little bit better than you can, and expect your builder to be at a certain level, to your HVAC guy to be at a certain level, etc. But as my landlord loves to say, expectation without inspection is useless. You can expect all you want, but if you're not inspecting it to make sure that you have some accountability and make sure that you're hitting a level that you want to be at, then that expectation doesn't get you very far. And then the last part of that is as you're being inspected, you're going to run into times to where you have to change stuff, you have to fix stuff. Somebody's going to tell you you messed up. It's happened to me multiple times, I guess, in the past as I've grown over the years. I had a lady like 10 years ago was an inspector, made us strip all of the tape off of commercial ductwork because the lettering was upside down. That is a bad inspector in my mind. But basically, you have to learn to allow inspectors to do their jobs, and you're going to hit that point where you're upset. You don't think that you should have to do what they're telling you to do. You don't see the point. You think it's useless. Just learn to be a little bit better with the code. Learn that that's what they're going to expect and inspect, and be better about your practices. I think fighting it is going. I think if you fight with an inspector over this stuff, I think they're going to hammer you that much harder, and you're going to make life more difficult on yourself. So just expect better, inspect better, and be better. I think the energy code is something that I guess most people disregard in our area of Texas. We don't have a whole lot of inspection here. A lot of the builders around here, they've been doing things the same way for 20 years. They're not going to change it until someone makes them. So I think the energy code has been more or less disregarded in this area. I've actually had a lot of arguments with contractors that are HVAC contractors about whether or not it applies to us. Even if you don't think that the 2015 Energy Code has applied to us, the Energy Code is referred to in Mechanical Code, and the Mechanical Code damn sure applies to us. So in my mind, that means the Energy Code applies to us. So that being said, you should currently be doing stuff up to 2015 Energy Code, but if you're one of those people that hasn't been practicing that way because you don't think the Energy Code applies to us, it's probably time to read up on it. Manual JDNS reports will become mandatory with all new construction. I don't believe that they're going to require you for changeouts, retrofit, stuff like that. A lot of areas of the country they do, but from the conversations that I've had with inspectors, I don't believe they're going to require that on retrofits and changeouts. That being said, I would say it's good practice to do that. Obviously, if you have a 60-year-old house and it's always had one size of AC and that size of AC has always worked and their humidity's been fine, they're not changing their insulation, etc. There's times to know if you're not required to do it on whether or not you should do it. However, if you go into a house and they're upgrading their insulation, they're getting tighter windows, they're making their house more efficient, you should absolutely be doing a manual JDNS on that house before you change out a system. Whether the code requires it or not, I think that's really good practice. But bottom line, if you have never done a manual JDNS, which I know there are a lot of contractors in our area that have not, you better learn to do one, or you better find someone to do them for you. I do believe, I know I've been talking with a guy for a couple of years on launching a company to do designs for other contractors, as well as blower door and duct blaster testing and a lot of this stuff. And I know we'll be launching that in October. So I do believe there will be companies like that spring up to where if you're a solo entrepreneur running one chuck in a truck or one guy in a truck type operation and you don't have time to learn how to do a manual JDNS properly, I believe there will be places to farm it out. There's already a few in Texas because DFW and Austin and Houston have been on this code for a while. But bottom line, you need to get familiar with how to read those. You need to get familiar with either how to do those or where you can get those. And I know that one, from the conversations with inspectors, that one is going to be a for sure. You file that paperwork before you begin building. I think that'll do a couple of things, though. I know I run into a lot to where I do a manual JDNS, and then I go to bid the home, and the size that I'm bidding is not the size that everyone else is bidding. And I'm like, I got this manual JDNS, this is how it's supposed to be. And the conversation I have more often than not is, well, there's 5 guys here that say that you're wrong, and you're the only one saying this is what it should be. And more often than not, they disregard me, which is fine, to be honest. If I can't do a job in a way that I think is proper and serving the customer correctly, then I'd rather not do the job. So there's kind of 2 sides to that, but I think that'll level that field a little bit. We'll have more consistent bidding, a better competitive market, a kind of fair competitive market. So I do think that shows some positives to us as contractors who are out here trying to do a good job. I think it'll level the playing field a little bit. It'll take out some of those companies who have no interest in doing a good job because they know they'll never be back. I think that'll eliminate some of that stuff, which will be good for the trade overall, good for homes and all of that. I saw a report the other day that estimated 40% of systems in Texas that are being put in oversized. I actually would estimate that number's higher. But what the manual J does is it gives you a BTU rating. The manual D gives you a duct layout, and the manual S tells you what equipment actually outputs the BTUs that you need for that size of house. If you're using a 2-speed system, you can oversize slightly. I believe it's a 10% increase. And then if you're using variable speed, you can go 20% over. And that allows you to account for those 105, 110 degree days, because what manual J has in there is designing a house to stay 75 on a 100-degree day. We have two things working against us in Texas there. Very few people keep their house at 75. Most of them keep it around 70. And then the other thing working against us is the last few years, we've had a whole lot more 105-degree days than I had ever experienced. I've been here about 15 years, and I know that the last couple summers, maybe they haven't had as many hot days in a row that are over 100, but I feel like we've had more 105-degree days the last couple of years than I had ever experienced before that. So I feel like trying to use a variable speed system to hit that 120% to where you're still inside a manual S, to control the humidity, but you're covering for that 105 degrees. I think that's beneficial. But it will surprise you. When I started doing manual JDNS years ago, I was really surprised, because I had always, like most people, heard the 400, 500, 600 square foot a ton, whatever rule of thumb the person that taught you taught you. And what you'll find is a lot of these homes are not requiring anywhere near that. And I was just surprised at the differences. You'll get a new appreciation for what effect shading windows versus non-shading and window leakage and all of this stuff does. So I think overall it'll be a positive change doing the manual JDNS. The people that aren't currently doing one, yeah, they're going to have to learn something new. They're going to have to start doing reports. It'll add some overhead to them. But I believe in the grand scheme of things, it's a positive thing. I believe we get a better product to our customers. I believe that it will up the quality of work that we get from our employees because we can expect better. Overall, I think it'll be a positive thing. I actually can't believe that we have not been enforcing that for years. But anyways, that's going to be one of the major adjustments that you see right away. So in addition to the code books that you're buying, I would familiarize myself with manual JDNS. If you do light construction, manual N. And if you're doing commercial construction, com checks and stuff like that. I've heard mixed things from inspectors on whether or not they'll require a resi check, which is like a com check. So I would go ahead and familiarize myself with that if I'm in the residential sphere, because it's possible that you'll have to submit that manual JDNS as well as a resi check. So that's some stuff that I would be picking up if I was not familiar with it in Texas. This is supposed to hit January 1st, but if Dublin, Texas is starting to require it, I have a feeling you're going to start having it required by a lot of inspectors before January 1st. I would expect September and October to kind of be where you see that start gaining steam as different counties and cities adopt it early. I know, I believe September was September 30. Can't remember if it's the end of September or beginning of September is when, if you're starting a new construction project, then it has to be following the code that will be in effect on January 1st. So if you're starting one tomorrow, I believe that you need to be following this code, which means you better have a manual JDNS on it. You better be sizing your equipment properly, and all of that stuff. The next step off of that, kind of an aftershock to that I see coming is we'll use more variable speed equipment, or two-stage. I personally am not a fan of two-stage equipment. I think the solenoid in the compressor is a bad design, and I think you see a lot of problems with two-speed. But that's a personal opinion. It's nothing that I've got a whole lot of data to back up. But I personally don't use two-speed. I use the Samsung Hilux variable speed compressor. I believe the Hilux is a really good example of variable speed on a budget. You can argue, I know I'll have people tell me their Carrier Infinity system or their Train XV system, etc., is better. I've done both. I'm not sure that the performance of either one is better or worse. I'll even give you that those systems have a touch better performance or are capable of a touch better performance on the high end as far as efficiency. I will counter with the price of a system like a Samsung Hilux outweighs that little bit of better efficiency you get, and then I don't have the communication problems you have. So I think you'll need to familiarize yourself with variable speed systems if you're not already familiar, and find one that works for you. Like I said, I recommend the Hilux. If you're not familiar with it, go look it up, samsunghvac.com. But I think we'll see more variable speed equipment, which means the efficiency on the average home will go up, which means that the knowledge that your installers and techs will need to improve. And again, it's sort of inconvenient to adapt to, but again, I think it's good for the trade. I think by going to more variable speed, high efficiency systems, the knowledge overall of your techs and your installers and everything will improve, as well as your knowledge of how equipment operates. So as an aftershock of the manual JD&S, I believe you'll see that become a thing to where more people do the variable speed, high efficiency stuff. And with the rising price of equipment, I personally feel like finding a way to do it at a lower budget is going to be beneficial. I mean, all of us know all of our bills are more expensive today than yesterday. Contractors, you know, your overhead's as high as it's ever been, and the price changes on equipment are as high as they've ever been. And we have the refrigerant change coming, which is probably going to add to all of that. So I think doing a little research, finding equipment that works for you, finding equipment from your preferred brand, dealer, or whatever. I think I would get on top of that, because I do think you'll see a rise in that, especially in new construction over the next few years. I think as an overall product that we're putting out as contractors, I think homeowners will be in a better place because of it. I believe that the knowledge that our techs and installers have will increase because of it. With that, you're going to have to hold your employees more accountable. You're going to have to do more training. You're going to have to put more effort in. But as a whole, that makes our skills more valuable, not less valuable. So I never understand that when contractors complain about having to improve a skill. And that's one of those things. I think our overhead and everything, our equipment is getting so expensive. We are a major expense if something comes up on a home. Now I know as far as margins and numbers and all of that, we're not making that much more money. It's just costing that much more money. But bottom line, the customer is writing a bigger check, and I think with that, they can expect us to operate at a higher level. And I think because of that, we can expect our employees to operate at a higher level and expect more out of our employees. And I think that having to do the manual JD&S and learn some of that stuff, and having the after effect of working with more complicated higher efficiency equipment will up the game a little bit, and I think as a trade we'll be better off because of it. Off of that, the other thing that I see coming, you'll do your manual JDNS, you'll do whatever equipment you're doing, but with spray foam in particular, I think one thing that I find concerning that more people aren't aware of are air changes an hour on a house. And this goes to builders and to contractors and to the homeowners building them. Air changes an hour on a house are very, very important, both for the quality of the construction, for the sizing of the AC equipment, and for how you control the humidity and the ventilation of the house. So if you're not familiar with what air changes an hour are or how they affect all of that stuff, I think you need to do some research on that, because I believe that's going to play a huge part in everything that we do with the new code changes. And again, I think it's a good thing for the trade. I think because we learn about that, we're holding builders more accountable by requiring them to meet a specific level, which means even our quote-unquote loose construction will be a tighter construction, a better built house for the homeowner, a house that doesn't lose its cooling or its heat as quickly for the customer. But with that, we're going to have to quit ignoring the V in HVAC. In Texas, most companies call themselves air conditioning. The heating is such a short cycle, we don't worry too much about that. It's just kind of something we do when we're in our off season, but we don't hit blizzards of a month long. We don't get 9 months of winter. So the heating is kind of neglected, and I think that'll continue to be the case. But the ventilation is an important part of HVAC. And as we move into tighter construction, regardless of code changes, for your equipment to function properly and your house to be healthy for people to live in, ventilation is very important. The new code changes will put some very strict guidelines on that, and you're going to have to familiarize yourself with that. One of the big ones is adding fresh air into a home. You need to account for the number of people in the home, the volume of the home, the ACH on how much it's breathing, the amount of air that your bathroom fans and your kitchen fans are putting out, and how much air you need to pull in to offset that. This one's been touched on a bit in the last few years. Inspectors know that you're supposed to be adding fresh air. Most of them don't know how you're supposed to be doing it. So as long as there's a pipe going outside, they call it good. I believe that's going to change. I believe the inspectors from the classes that I've heard that they're taking, I believe they'll have a lot better idea of what you're supposed to be doing with your ventilation, which means you as a contractor need to have a lot better idea of what you're doing. Hopefully this will put us past the days of people running a duct outside straight to the return with no control and no filtration. It's a horrible way to do it. For a number of reasons. Obviously, you're introducing dirty air into your coil. And on top of that, you have no idea how much air. It depends on how much the unit runs. And it doesn't ever account for outside factors. So in the house that I referenced earlier, where we have high humidity, high mold content, they had run a duct straight outside. It was pulling anytime the unit would run. Because the unit was short cycling and oversized, that unit ran 24/7. They were trying to keep their house at 68 or 69 or somewhere around there just to pull the humidity down. When I was at the house, it was 83% in one room, 91 in another. It was extremely high. There was mold growing different places, but the unit was still running. It was kicking on and off, every 5 minutes or so. So even though the air temperature was 68 degrees with 80% humidity, it was uncomfortable in there. On top of that, with the mold and everything growing, there was a whole lot of reasons for that house to not be lived in. It's a very good example of poor indoor air quality, poor HVAC, and that's why we're going to hit an episode on it tomorrow. But I think the days of doing the ventilation like that will be gone. I know a lot of people like the time dampers. I used them for a while. They're better than not having control over it. I've went away from it for two reasons. The first is I like the idea of filtering that air on the way in, and with the time damper, there wasn't a good way to do that. I more or less use ERVs, or I use a fresh air intake box with a filter and a control. This way, if I do it that way, I am filtering it on the way in. If you're using the ERV, you're slightly conditioning the air as it's being pulled in. You're offsetting and putting out some air. And then they're taking into account if it's 105 outside, it does not pull air in. You can set a temperature to where it doesn't pull that air in, and it'll wait for the evening when the temperature drops. That way you're not in the heat of the day under the biggest load your AC is going to pull and adding 105 degrees in. So having that control over it, you can also set humidity settings so that when it's raining, it doesn't pull that humidity in. The house that I spoke of, they said that when it was raining, their sheets would actually be wet on their bed, basically because their house was already 80-odd%, and now they were pulling in basically rain, and their unit was basically just overloading their house to where he said he had set up some humidity sensors and he was reading as high as 95, 96% humidity in his house. So that's something that I think is worth diving into. Go look up what ERVs are, what fresh air machines are, what the time dampers are. Aprilaire has one that's really popular, and kind of do your research, decide what works for you. But mainline, I think you're going to have to learn your ventilation a little bit better if you're not already on top of it. This is one of those things that I think overall, again, it's a little bit of an inconvenience to have to do that design and find out how much air you're bringing in and set all of your controls, and your installers are going to have to know how to set up the controller, and all of these things that are inconveniences going to eat up some time, going to add some overhead to jobs. But in the end, again, we're delivering a safer, better product to our customers. So I think overall, I think it'll bring our trade up, not down. I know that there will be some pushback on that, on the fight between whether you think tight construction is better or loose construction is better, and the only reason we're having to do this stuff is because they're making us build tight. That's not what I'm here to argue today. I think that tight construction is better because if a home breathes naturally, you have those 5 air changes an hour naturally rather than using a controlled damper or an ERV. I have no control of what comes into that house. I don't. The air coming through is unfiltered. It's just drifting through your walls. If we have a tight house and I am bringing in that fresh air and I am filtering it and I am controlling what temperature and what humidity levels are allowable into it, I can control the quality of the air in your home much better. I can give you a more comfortable, healthier house with a tight house than I can a loose house. On the flip side of that, if you have tight construction and you are not doing your HVAC right, you are a petri dish building mold and bacteria, and that's not good. So while I'm not here to have the tight construction, loose construction debate, I do think that's worth keeping in mind. Remember, our basic job is to control air. We control where it flows, We control how healthy it is. We control the temperature of it. We control the humidity of it. That is our job. So I believe going into building science a little bit, studying that, weighing out the different things that go with that is very useful. And I think it's something that if you're not already doing it, you should be, if for no other reason than a lot of the code changes are going to stress those things, and you're going to need to know how to do them to pass your inspections. So off of that, and this is something that I don't think they're going to enforce heavy, blower door testing on houses. Basically, you can design for whatever blower door, whatever ACH you want. If the builder does a poor job with his framing, or does a poor job with his ceiling or his insulation, you're now out in the wind on your design. If you design for 3 air changes an hour and they give you 5, you're probably not going to be sized large enough. If you design for 3 and they give you 1, you're probably going to be oversized. Your fresh air will be off. All of this stuff will be off. So while I don't know that they'll enforce the blower door testing, I suggest you do it on your new construction. If for no other reason than to give you the best chance of success of the customer and the end user being happy with your product. If you're designing a house with the specific parameters that Manual J gives you of 75 degrees at whatever your local high temp is, most places around me it's 98 to 100. If you're designing it that way and you're being confined to that design, and you are a half a ton off one way or the other, it can have drastic effects on how the air feels in the house, whether or not they can cool the house when they want to. So I believe learning about blower door testing and how to read blower door results is something worth looking into. It's mentioned in the code. Like I said, I don't know that they'll enforce that part of it. I know in Dallas, Fort Worth, and a lot of these places, they are enforcing it, and every new house gets hit with it. So I think it's worthwhile to know about it, and hopefully it gets enforced. Again, that isn't, all this stuff adds on cost. It's all more overhead, more time, all of this. But if we're going to get laid into these guidelines of making sure that we're designing right, and we're going to get better at our jobs, designing these systems properly and delivering the product to the customer to be healthy and comfortable and all of that, we kind of have to rely on the builders doing their jobs. And I don't feel like a lot of the builders really care, to be honest. There's a lot of good builders out there, but with the lax restrictions on who can build homes in Texas, there are also a lot of builders who, even if they care, they don't know. So I would say if they're not enforcing the blower door test where you are, I would pay the couple of $100s to have it done, just to let at the end of the house you know that your design is right. And if your blower door test comes in different than your target, you can have that conversation with the builder, and it's not a, well, I don't think it's leaking that bad, or I don't think it's doing this or that. It is a, here's what the test says, this is where we're at, this is what we were designing for. So if you're not familiar with that stuff, I would get up to date on it. It'll be in the code. Whether or not they enforce it is kind of up in the air. Like I said, I've gotten different answers from different inspectors when I've talked to them. Off of the blower door testing, the next thing will be the duct blasting testing. I'm one of the only ones in my area that I know that hits duct blasting. There's a couple that'll do it occasionally. I try to do it on all my new construction. You'll have to change, and again, I'm speaking to generalities that I see in our area and across Texas as I hit different things. But there's a lot of people don't paint duct sealant on their boots before they slide their duct on. Um, if you're not doing that currently, you'll have to do it with the duct blaster. You won't pass with just a Panduit or just tape. So if you need to incorporate that into your installer's practices, it'd be good to get a jump on it. That way, once you get to January and they're enforcing it, you're not having houses fail to where you've got to pull all the ductwork off and reseal it. One thing that I had to do on a house that I had not heard of before that kind of I thought was ridiculous overboard at the time of doing it, and then saw the duct blaster test change that I think is worth considering is taking silicone or mastic and sealing between the boot and the sheetrock where your grill pulls your boot into the sheetrock. Sealing that little air gap there will prevent quite a bit of duct loss, it turns out. So that's something that I'm starting to incorporate in that I had not done before nor heard of before. But an inspector suggested it on a house where we failed the duct blast test, and it did help. On that test, actually, and this goes back to accountability with your employees and holding yourself to a certain standard. But that was heat of summer. We roughed one in. I had a couple of guys that were new that had experience, but the companies they had worked for had not required them to do a lot of the stuff I asked of them. Actually, neither one of those guys worked it out, so maybe I should have known. But I had told them to go ahead and make sure they painted everything and all of this. Told them we were hitting it with the duct blaster. Neither one of them had ever heard of a duct blaster. Both of them had more than 3 years experience, so that tells you how rare it is in our area. But anyways, they didn't listen to me. They roughed it in and did not paint everything. And being the middle of summer, I saw pictures of mastic around the insulation, and I was like, good, we're sealed, and we weren't. So we failed it once. We went back and we painted mastic and we put it up there, and we failed by a couple of percent on the second time. And I went over the system personally, and I could not find where we were leaking to fail this. And this was a smaller system, so it takes less CFM to fail that test. And the inspector suggested that we silicone around those boots, and I thought that was ridiculous. And then I did it, and we passed. So I would say that that's something that's maybe worth working in. I'm currently trying to work that in. It's hard to change habits overnight. So where we have this coming and we have a couple of months, start building those habits. It's really hard to change your habits overnight. It's extremely hard to change all of your employees' habits overnight. So getting to work on that's probably beneficial. The duct blaster will hit the ductwork with high pressure. It will not be the pressure of your system. It will be a higher pressure. And the percentage of air that is lost will determine whether you pass or fail. The high side of that is your design that you're designing by manual D to have certain CFM in every room. If you're not losing air, it will be that much more effective. So again, it makes a better quality product on the end, but it'll adjust your practices just a little. I guess off of the duct blaster and the blower door and the manual JDNS and the comm checks, the next thing that I would go to is really the standard building practices that get missed on jobs. Guys don't put nail plates across the front where your freon lines go through the wall. That's going to be a lot stickier situation, especially with the change to A2L. They're going to hit that pretty hard. Um, I've heard rumors that they're going to uh, pass a national code that requires you to put A2L refrigerant lines in a metal casing in the wall. Um, that would be interesting. I don't. That would change things dramatically, because what if you're doing a change out and the refrigerant lines already run through the walls and you don't have a way to run a new set? Are you going to rip out a wall to encase them? So that's something that could be happening, that I've heard rumors on, but I'm not sure will hit with the A2L change. But if it does, it's sure going to make life interesting. I don't know what the solution to that's going to be honest, other than running new refrigerant lines for everything on the outside wall, or ripping walls open and wrapping them in some sort of metal casing. Somebody will become a millionaire developing a casing that snaps together around the Freon lines. If you're one of those people and you're going to invent that and make $1 million, kick some back. Brother could use some help. But all of this stuff is coming. The reason that I would say this is important today versus January is you want to start changing the practices of your company, of your employees, as quickly as possible. And the other thing that I see happening is there's going to be people caught off guard by these code changes that haven't heard about them in January. And they're going to be reading and trying to pass inspections and trying to change all of this stuff overnight. And while they're being beat to death with the code changes, the A2L refrigerant change is going to hit. And personally, I've yet to see an A2L system. So as much as I've read and studied on them, I did a podcast last week on it. That's what I know. And that scares me. We're a few months away, and we really haven't had a trial period with it. So that's going to take some adjustment of its own if everything goes smoothly. They're adding leak sensors on these coils that, to my knowledge, have not been used in equipment before. There's variations of it in gas furnaces and different stuff. But what happens when we have a mass failure of refrigerant sensors, and we're having to go back and replace a bunch of them, and they're changing up the equipment that we're already learning, and on top of that, you're getting hit with inspections that you've never had to follow. So more than anything, I think the next couple of months, adjusting your business, adjusting your practices, adjusting your knowledge on these code changes will be really important, just because you don't want to be changing it and learning all of it while you're changing all of your knowledge and practices surrounding your refrigerants, and then just adjusting your general business, because I believe we'll see significant overhead changes from both the code changes and the A2L changes. So we're going to have to be on top of our game on the business side of things to stay in business and stay making money with all of these changes happening. And it's really hard to do that if you're putting out fires, learning code changes, failing inspections, dealing with an A2L sensor that you've no experience with. So I would take the time right now to order some books, get up to date on it, do a Google search of Texas code changes in 2025, look up everything as far as the books that you need to adjust, and then start doing searches on your ventilation, on your ACHs, on your designs. Whatever you're not currently doing, go ahead and get ahead of it before the first of the year, because the first of the year is going to be wild enough with the refrigerant change. I don't think you want to deal with both at the same time. On the homeowner end, man, I feel bad for y'all next year, the next couple of years. It's going to be major changes to the pricing. it's already expensive to get your AC changed out. It's going to be even worse next year. And on top of that, uh, the knowledge surrounding it is not going to be as high as it's been in the past. Uh, so I really feel for homeowners going into this. You've never known code really well. Uh, you've always, hey, my friend has a guy that built their house and they like their house. Um, I think you're going to have to be pickier about builders. Uh, I would be having conversations about code before I let a builder build my house. I would have conversations with their HVAC people. The electrical and plumbing will change a bit as well. It won't be as drastic of a change as what we're going to see on our end as far as practices. Uh, so I would say going forward as a consumer, as a customer, as a homeowner or someone building a home, uh, I would be quizzing potential builders about code changes before they start. I would personally talk to the HVAC contractor. Builders, for some reason, hate that. Me talking to whoever's building the house is a problem with a lot of builders. Me designing a system that works for you is really hard if we're both talking through a builder. So I would, as much as builders won't like it, I would get the name of the HVAC contractor putting your stuff in. I would have personal conversations with them. If you're not able to have personal conversations with them, at least make sure you're seeing the manual JDNS reports. And when you have the manual JDNS, you know what size the ductwork's supposed to be, you know what size the equipment's supposed to be. You can at the very least walk around your install and make sure that it's being put in properly. But it's going to be a wild time to be a homeowner having to deal with AC stuff the next couple of years. It's going to be a pretty wild time keeping up with it as a contractor. The one thing that I think we've got going for us is we do have platforms like social media, like podcasts, like online books. We have access to so much more information than we've ever had access to. We've got better communication than we've ever had access to. I believe if we all kind of get out there together and talk to one another, like I said, shoot me a message, give me a phone call, whatever. Get in touch with me and let me know if I'm wrong about something. Let me know if you've tried, if you do AeroSeal and you believe it's the best thing ever and you've seen it pay off in your business, give me a call. I don't personally do AeroSeal because I don't want to drop the money into the machine. I've seen it work. I'm a believer in it working. I just haven't made it work with my finances. But if there's a way to where you made it work with your finances and you had a good strategy implementing it, please hit me a message. Let me know about it. If you have a way of sealing ductwork that you think works really well, or you've got a little tip on how it sped it up for your guys, or you were able to hold your guys more accountable, hit me up with it. Apps like Company Cam, getting pictures as they're doing stuff, all of this has improved how we can do this stuff. But I feel like there's a shortage of contractors in general in the country, and that there is tons of HVAC work, and I believe the A2L changes and the code changes are going to create even more HVAC work, and we're going to be even more shorthanded. As much as we're competing, we're also kind of in this together. So if you have tips, tricks, whatever, give me a message, shoot me a call. Any of that stuff is useful. If you happen to get called out to the same company's install 2 or 3 times in a row and they are not painting mastic on their boots, or they are not putting fresh air in properly, whatever, hit up that owner. Sometimes they'll fly you the bird and they'll tell you to go away. But sometimes they just don't know. And if you tell them that, maybe they can up their practices and their customers can get a better experience, get a better home. Um, if you feel like you have to be cutthroat about competition and that working with other contractors is detracting from you, I think that you're in the wrong, and I think adjusting to these code changes and adjusting to the A2L, I think all of these things are going to take really good communication. So last week, I guess I ended it saying that the A2L changes were going to take a lot of transparency from the contractors to the customers, and that communication was going to be paramount in that relationship. I think these code changes, coupled with that, I believe that the transparency from one company to another, from one contractor to another, the communication between us, I think that's what's going to make this go smoother and be better. I I still believe that if you're a company that has an edge in a business, I believe you'll still have an edge in a business. I believe that there's always going to be people who don't pay attention to code. I believe there will always be people take shortcuts. One guy that I used to work with called them members of the hack and saw tribe. I always thought that was funny. You're always going to have those guys. It should be, to me, it should be a united front of competent contractors on forcing those guys out of business, not every contractor for himself. The more good contractors we have, the better practices we create, the better employees that are available, the more pride people take in their work, the more pride employees have in their stuff. I believe all of this stuff is interrelated, and with everything we got coming our way, I think that getting active on social media, getting active in your communication is going to be key to overcoming a lot of this. That's all I got for today. Tomorrow we'll be going through my report on what we'll refer to as the mold house, and what created a lot of the problems that we're seeing there, and how you can fix them, and how we're going to quote fixing them, and hopefully they'll allow us to do it, and we can follow that up further down the road with what worked, what didn't, if we had to adjust stuff, all of that. So tune in for that episode tomorrow. See, if nothing else, see some pictures of some really crappy HVAC work, and then get an idea of what can happen in the worst case scenario, to where maybe you can point a customer that way and say, hey, the reason that I do it this way is so that you don't run into these problems. Watch this episode of this podcast of this guy that talks way too much, and maybe you'll see some pictures and you'll get an idea of why we do things this way. Use it as a resource. That'd be great. Like I said, the point of my podcast is not so much feeling arrogant or superior or anything like that. It's more getting the conversation started, getting info out there, giving us resources to better serve customers. So thanks for stopping by. Hit, click, like, follow, all of that fun stuff. Till next time.